Called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but
It's
isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant it.
In the high-octane arena of daytime television, where opinions clash like gladiators in a coliseum, a recent episode of The View became the stage for a verbal showdown that left audiences stunned. Sunny Hostin, a mainstay of the show known for her fiery rhetoric and unyielding moral stance, found herself metaphorically flattened by the combined forces of Bill Maher and Megyn Kelly. The exchange was less a debate and more a masterclass in dismantling performative outrage, exposing the fragility of Hostin's carefully curated persona. What unfolded was a spectacle that oscillated between cringe-worthy and compelling, a moment that crystallized the growing exhaustion with sanctimonious monologues masquerading as discourse. The drama began innocently enough, with Hostin sipping her tea, exuding the confidence of someone who believes their worldview is unimpeachable. Armed with her law degree and a penchant for framing every issue as a moral crusade, she's built a persona as The View's resident legal scholar and social justice warrior. Her approach is predictable: wield her credentials like a lightsaber, sprinkle in a dash of righteous indignation, and pivot any topic, be it politics, pop culture, or even sandwich condiments, into a sermon on systemic oppression. On this particular day, however, her usual script was about to be torn to shreds. Bill Maher, the sardonic comedian whose career thrives on skewering hypocrisy across the political spectrum, and Megyn Kelly, the former Fox News anchor with a knack for surgically precise arguments, entered the fray with no intention of playing along. The clash wasn't just a disagreement over facts. It was a philosophical demolition derby, with Hostin's glitter glue rhetoric pitted against the bulldozers of Maher's wit and Kelly's logic. By the end, Hostin's polished TED Talk energy had unraveled into a bad improv routine, leaving her blinking in the spotlight like someone who just opened an unexpectedly hefty internet bill. The catalyst for this takedown was a discussion about patriotism, world superpowers, and the cultural baggage of terms like woke. Hostin, true to form, seized the opportunity to lecture. She argued that the notion of American patriotism had been co-opted by the right, framing it as inherently exclusionary. Her delivery was classic Sunny, a blend of legal jargon, emotional anecdotes, and a tone that suggested dissent was not just wrong but morally bankrupt. She referenced FBI Director Christopher Wray's comments on white supremacy as a domestic threat, implying that any defense of patriotism was a dog whistle for bigotry. It was a move she'd executed countless times, expecting the audience to nod along and the conversation to pivot to her next talking point. But Maher and Kelly weren't having it. Maher, with his decades of experience navigating cultural minefields, watched Hostin's monologue with the detached amusement of a professor grading a poorly argued essay. He didn't interrupt. There was no need. Hostin's rhetoric was already unraveling under its own weight, each sanctimonious breath digging her deeper into a pit of buzzwords and rehearsed outrage. When he finally spoke, it was with the cool precision of someone who'd seen this act before. He pointed out the absurdity of equating patriotism with extremism, noting that hating half the country for their political leanings was a recipe for division, not progress. His line about refusing to live in a country where he despised half the population landed like a dart, exposing the hypocrisy of Hostin's us versus them worldview. Kelly, meanwhile, brought a different kind of heat. Calm, composed, and armed with facts, she dismantled Hostin's arguments with the precision of a surgeon. When Hostin tried to pivot the conversation to racial injustice, her go-to move regardless of the topic, Kelly countered with a clear-eyed assessment of global power dynamics. She pointed out that if America wasn't the leading global power, the alternative wouldn't be a benign Scandinavian utopia, but a regime like China's, with its well-documented human rights abuses. Kelly's delivery was devoid of theatrics, which made it all the more devastating. In the ecosystem of The View, where emotional outbursts often pass for insight, her reliance on data and logic was practically revolutionary. Hostin's response was telling. Instead of engaging with Kelly's points, she doubled down, her voice rising as if volume could compensate for a lack of substance. It's a tactic she's leaned into before. When challenged, retreat to the fortress of moral superiority. She flung historical references with the accuracy of a toddler tossing spaghetti, hoping something would stick. At one point, she compared the January 6th Capitol riot to the Holocaust, a hyperbolic leap that even her co-host Whoopi Goldberg seemed to wince at. It was a desperate move, the kind of rhetorical overreach that collapses under scrutiny. Kelly didn't even raise her voice to counter it. She simply laid out a timeline of events, citing sources and statistics that exposed the exaggeration for what it was. What made this exchange so remarkable wasn't just Hostin's unraveling, but the way it highlighted her broader approach to discourse. She thrives in monologue, not dialogue, preferring to accuse, dramatize, and moralize like she's stirring in a one-woman courtroom drama. Her co-hosts, accustomed to the show's applause-driven format, often let her steamroll unchallenged. But Maher and Kelly don't operate by those rules. They don't rely on audience reactions or emotional spirals. They bring wit, facts, and a willingness to call out nonsense, even when it's dressed up in the armor of moral certainty. Hostin's Achilles' heel is her unshakable belief that her outrage is always justified. She carries herself as if her opinions are carved in stone, and anyone who disagrees is a heretic to be shamed. This mindset works when you're preaching to the choir, but it crumbles when faced with opponents who refuse to be cowed. Maher, seasoned and unfazed, treated her tirades like Nerf darts bouncing off a concrete wall. Kelly, with her calm rebuttals, stripped away the layers of Hostin's faux gravitas, revealing a core of recycled indignation that couldn't withstand scrutiny. The fallout was swift and brutal. Hostin tried to pivot to victimhood, a classic fallback when logic runs dry. She accused her critics of threatening democracy, leaning into the kind of apocalyptic rhetoric that's become her trademark. But the audience wasn't buying it. Even her fans, who typically cheer her bold stands, seemed to sense the hollowness of her performance. Social media lit up with reactions, many pointing out that Hostin's collapse wasn't about a single bad day, but the inevitable implosion of a worldview built on contradictions. She came in thinking she could save democracy by yelling louder. Instead, she got a lesson in the power of reason over noise. The irony is that Hostin sees herself as a defender of truth, yet her approach often stifles it. She's quick to champion women's voices until a woman like Kelly disagrees with her. Then the sisterhood turns into a battlefield, with Hostin gatekeeping who's allowed to have an opinion. Her war on humor is equally telling. She seems allergic to jokes, treating sarcasm as a personal affront and satire as a moral failing. When Maher made a quip about the absurdity of equating political disagreements with existential threats, Hostin reacted as if he'd committed a hate crime. It's a curious stance for someone who claims to understand society's complexities but can't handle a comedian doing what comedians do, poking fun at everyone. In the end, what made this moment so memorable wasn't just Hostin's defeat, but the clarity it brought to a broader cultural divide. She represents a style of discourse that prioritizes feelings over facts, volume over substance, and moral posturing over genuine engagement. It's a style that thrives in echo chambers, but falters when challenged by those who value clarity and reason. Maher and Kelly didn't just win an argument. They exposed the exhaustion many feel with performative outrage dressed up as intellectual debate. As the dust settled, Hostin was left clutching her trademark frown, her once steady platform resembling a shaky IKEA stool. The audience, both in the studio and at home, was left to grapple with a simple truth: yelling louder doesn't make you right. In a world craving authentic dialogue, the mic isn't just for the loudest voice, it's for the clearest. And on this day, that clarity belonged to Maher and Kelly, who reminded us that facts, wit, and logic still have a place in public discourse, even when the noise threatens to drown them out.